Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. By George, we've got Mingus Maps here with us today, and he's running. You can find him in the voters pamphlet. You can find him in the voters pamphlet. Check it out, look at it, whatever. But by the way, while we're sitting here, when you take that break for a cup of coffee, you might want to run and tell your friends and your neighbors to come and sit down and look at the video, look at the encounter that we're going to have with him. He's going to be a very, very important person here within the city. Very, very important. Let me go on to introduce Jack. How goes it? Okay.
Good evening, Bruce. Mingus, wanted to thank you for coming on Oregon Voters Digest. As I think I explained to you, the program is designed to provide the voters of Portland information and insight on all the candidates that are brave enough to come on the show. So my first question would be simply to ask you to explain to us why you decided to run for Portland City Commissioner. Sure. And what skills and expertise you think you will bring as City Commissioner.
Sure. Great question. But before I start, let me just say thanks to everyone who helped pull together this important event. We have one of the most important elections in a generation coming up in just a matter of a couple of weeks. So thanks to everyone who's paying attention. Thanks to everyone who's trying to get the word out about the candidates and issues on the ballots. And thanks to everyone who's tuning in at home. And yes, this is a question I think about all the time, especially as we're 3 weeks away from the election, is why did I get into this in the first place? And I can remember back in the day, probably 18 months ago, Jack and I were on the campaign trail seeing each other a lot. And it's been a great journey, and I've made so many great friends. And, like Jack and Bruce too, you've been on the ballot many times myself. You're speaking of trailblazers here. I'm running for office for the same reason that you two are running for office or have run for office, and folks at home are tuning in. I love Portland, but I'm also deeply concerned about the direction our city is heading in. And we all know the problems, right? If you've been downtown lately, you've seen the impacts of COVID and protests. Our economy is shut down. I got an 11-year-old upstairs and a 10-year-old down in my basement. And our school doors have not been open for nearly 7 months now. So that is that's a burden on families, and it's a wound to kids. And we got to set this right. And I would argue that one of the ways that we set this right is to have the courage to move in some new directions, and that's why I'm in this race. I think I have the background and vision needed to get Portland back on track. For those of Jack and I are old friends, and Bruce, I've known you for a little bit, but for those of you who don't know me, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a single dad. I'm progressive. I'm pragmatic. I have deep roots in Portland. I did my undergraduate work at Reed College and then went on to get a PhD in government from Cornell University. And I've split my career between being a political science professor, teaching on issues surrounding urban politics at places like Cornell University and Harvard University and Brandeis University and Portland State University. And I've also been a public servant here in Portland. So I've held policymaking positions at the City of Portland, Multnomah County, and Portland Public Schools. That background, everything from the academic piece to the public service piece, has taught me an awful lot about how Portland works, why it sometimes doesn't work, and how we can come together to make Portland work better. And that's why I'm in this race. I want to make Portland work better. I have about 5 core issues that I want to highlight when I'm on City Council. Of course, the first of them right away has to deal with the COVID crisis that we face now. I believe yesterday we had the most number of COVID cases that we have seen since this pandemic set foot in the state of Oregon. Our economy has been shut down, and I know a lot of Portlanders are awfully concerned about their ability to meet their basic needs. The city has to be in a leadership position on all of these things. We got to hold the curve down. We got to make sure that everyone stays housed and can get fed and feed their families. And then we have to figure out how to open up our economy again, despite the fact that we don't quite yet have a vaccine, but we'll get there. So I hope to offer leadership on that. I'm also deeply concerned about racial justice issues. You know, obviously I'm an African American. I'm a dad to 2 young Black boys. My heart is heartened by the fact that we have so many Portlanders out in the streets every night demanding justice for families that look like mine. And when I'm on city council, I'll be sure that we push forward and make sure that we actually turn this energy and ideas into real policies that makes Portland a more just place. And, you know, part of that justice is reforming the police department. I've done a lot of innovative work around reimagining public safety here in Portland. So I was a leader in keeping community policing alive east of 82nd. That's why actually Commissioner Udaley recruited me to help run the city's crime prevention program, which does exactly what it says it does. We work with every neighborhood in the city to try to make communities and neighborhoods safer without necessarily relying on the police. And I want to take reforms like that into City Hall and actually write them into the police contract. And then, you know, after we deal with some of those immediate concerns, I think we have to get back to some basic and classic Portland issues. Things like homelessness. The other night, I went on a walk of downtown Portland with some local business owners who wanted to just show me both the tragedies that are on their streets and the challenges that they face as they try to open up their businesses again. And in a 90-minute walk through downtown and the Pearl District, I think we counted 180 tents on the streets of Portland. And, you know, the business owners down there were telling me, you know, Mingus, you know, we have nothing but compassion for these folks. But obviously this is an impending public health crisis. As winter comes and the rains start, all these folks who are living on the street are gonna be subject to COVID. And once COVID really sets root in our houseless community, that'll take the pandemic to a whole different level. We got to make progress on that. And, you know, I actually resist the notion that we can't solve homelessness. And one of the things I'm going to do on city council is to challenge Portland, both city government, nonprofit, and the private sector to come together around one goal. Let's end chronic homelessness here in Portland. In other words, let's end the tradition of street camping within our city limits. And I know this sounds difficult, but it's not as difficult as you might think it is. We have good information on the people who sleep on our streets. There are about 4,000 folks who sleep on our streets every night in tents or in sleeping bags in doorways and whatnot. And there's a reason why these folks are on the streets 365 days a year. You know, not only do they have affordability issues around housing, but they often suffer from mental health issues or health issues. And I think that if we provided that community with both an affordable place to live and connected them to social services, we could actually end the scourge of chronic homelessness here in Portland. And this is does not depend on creating a new source of revenue. Over the last several years, Portlanders have dedicated nearly $500 million to provide new affordable housing and services to the houseless. One of the things our next city council needs to do is to make sure we spend those dollars wisely and actually accomplish something. And I think that if we just set aside 4,000 affordable housing units and connected those to social services, we can go a long ways towards ending the tradition of street camping here in the city. Another way to end homelessness is to bring more affordable housing to the city, and obviously I care about that. I think one of the things that we need to do is to, number one, preserve the affordable housing that we have right now. I think everyone in the city has seen, the classic Portland cottage get ripped down and replaced by 2 unaffordable condo units. That's a dynamic that I think we need to be concerned about. But in addition to preserving like the affordable housing that we already have, I think it's also time that we get City Hall out of the way of bringing new development to Portland. I think that a lot of people don't realize is that Portland in particular imposes an incredible amount of bureaucracy and an incredible number of fees on folks who want to bring affordable housing to the city. You know, for example, if you want to build an affordable housing complex in Portland, it can take more than a year to get those plans approved by City Hall. And then the fees that City Hall charges for affordable housing units can actually equal the amount of money that you're going to spend on materials to build that affordable housing. That's insane. One of the things I think we need to do is make sure that the incentives that Portland puts in place are aligned with our goals. And if we want to have more affordable housing, we need to make sure that the rules City Council puts in place actually creates benefits and incentives to build affordable housing in the city. And the last series of issues I want to talk about deal with fundamental reform down at City Hall. You know, if you've spent any time in Portland or interacted with City Hall, you probably have come away from that experience thinking there's something broken down in City Hall. And, you know, as a guy who has worked in City Hall several times over the course of my career, I can tell you that instinct is correct. And it's not just a matter of leadership, although there's obviously some leadership problems down at City Hall. There's also structural issues. And I would point to a couple of things. One is our commission form of government, which we have certainly outgrown. And for those of you at home who don't know what I mean by the commission form of government, let me give you a quick primer on this. Portland is the last city of its size to use what I'm describing as a commission form of government. To put this into context, commission forms of government kind of existed about 100 years ago and kind of started to go out of fashion about 80 years ago. Today, there's not a single city of Portland size in America that continues to use the commission form of government. And let me illustrate for you why. In Portland, uniquely, you know, we not only have a mayor and 4 members of city council, those folks, like city councilors everywhere in America, vote on policy issues and budgets. But in Portland, our elected officials have this other power. Each member of city council is the chief daily operating officer for at least one city bureau, which means that instead of having 1 mayor and 4 members of city council, what we really have are 5 mayors, each with their own fiefdom. You know, we basically have a mayor for the police bureau, a mayor for the fire department, a mayor for the water bureau, and so on and so forth. And I'll tell you, it might be, you know, if you think through this scenario, you might come to see some of the problems. And here's the problem in a nutshell. You know, the issues that Portland struggles with today remain unresolved because they are complex. Let's take an example like homelessness. You know, you might at first glance think that homelessness is relatively straightforward. You provide someone with housing and then the problem's solved. But if you've ever done any work in the houseless community, you know that it's more complex than that. Homelessness is not just a matter of housing. It's often a matter of mental health or drug addiction. It's certainly a public safety issue too. And if you want to have an effective houseless policy, one of the things that you need to do is to be able to coordinate programs as diverse as housing to public safety to mental health to alcohol and drug issues. And literally, Portland's commission form of government prevents us from doing that. You know, that's not a bug, that's a feature. And we got to stop doing that. You know, it's one of the reasons why our city is shut down right now, why we've made no progress on affordable housing, homelessness. I would argue it's going to be a real impediment as we try to open up our economy again in the post-COVID world. And I would even argue the commission form of government is probably undermining our ability to keep our COVID numbers low. We can solve this problem by directing city council to hire a city manager. Just some person who's in charge of coordinating services and budgets across city bureaus. This is the way cities in America are run. It's common sense. It's not rocket science, and it works. I think we've all seen at this point that what we're doing right now in Portland doesn't work. And then there are 2 other changes I want to make to how we operate city council. And they come down to this. I want to increase the number of seats we have on council. Right now we have 4 members of city council, and we've had that number since, I think, 1913, when there were about 200,000 people living in Portland. Today we have 700,000 people living in Portland, and we're still trying to represent them by just 4 people. And I'll tell you, you know, since 1913, not only has Portland grown enormously in terms of the number of people who who live in the city, but we're more diverse. We have more diverse we're more diverse demographically. I think we're more diverse ideologically, and it's an awfully heavy lift to expect just 4 people to represent the full range of politics and views that you see in the city. We can solve that by adding a couple more seats to city council. That way we'll get more voices at the table. I think there'll be more diverse voices. And one of the things I would argue is we'll get better decisions. I think as you get more people to the table and you get more ideas in the conversation, you're more likely to come up with good policies. And the last reform that I want to talk to you about today is let's change the way we fill those seats. Right now, everyone who's running for city council runs at large, which means I run, everyone in the city can, and I hope will vote for Mingus Maps for city council. And when we do that, the city will be better, but there's also a better way to handle the process of choosing elected officials. I think that instead of having each member of city council run at large, I think we should have neighborhood-based electoral districts. That way, represent our folks from East Portland could have a voice and representative on city council. Folks from St. John's could have a representative who was, elected from that neighborhood. West Hills and South Portland too. That way we have every corner of the city represented in city council chambers. I think that's going to make for a better public policy. I think that's going to make for a more engaged public. And I think it'll also reduce political alienation. I think one of the reasons we have so many people out on the streets right now is they feel disconnected and distant from their elected officials. But, if your member of city council lived in your neighborhood, someone that you saw at the grocery store or at your school meetings, I think you would feel different about government. And I think we'd have a better government. So those are some of the changes I want to make. And I could go on with literally 95 other issues too, but I won't subject you to that. But I will ask you for your support for trying to push these things through. I know it's an ambitious agenda, but let me tell you, I've been in Portland for a long time, and I think that when Portlanders work together and listen to each other, we can accomplish great things. I think that we can conquer COVID. I think that we can reform policing. I think that we can make Portland a more racially just city. I think that we can end chronic homelessness here within the borders of the city of Portland. Affordable housing, we can make that happen too. And we can fundamentally reinvent government so that it's modern and responsive and fair. And if you believe these things too, I hope that you'll go to my website, which is mingusmaps.com. Check us out and remember to turn in your ballot when it lands in your mailbox, which should just be about 7 days from now. So please vote early and volunteer often.
Yeah, well, that's great, Mingus. I was going to ask you for just 2, but you've given me more than enough.
Sorry.
Let me ask you a different question. Portland has, even though cost of living in Portland has gone up over the last decade,
Yep.
we still have the lowest cost of living of any city on the West Coast.
Yep.
Yet our city really hasn't drawn any new major businesses into the metropolitan area. So new businesses to me mean new jobs. And of course, for every new job, whether it's creation of anything, the support services, whether it's dentists, doctors, restaurants, a wide range of services go with that as well. Without giving any details, the report I have inside of the city council is that actually a major business actually met with someone in the city council, a commissioner, and they walked out of that meeting with the thought, quite simply, this is not a good place for business. So my question is, any ideas on how to attract new businesses, let's say like Apple, to the city of Portland, which would bring substantial new quality jobs to our city?
Great question, Jack, and I totally share this concern, especially in the COVID era, where you see major employers literally pulling out of the city. We should compare notes offline too. I can tell you about some companies that literally wanted to build facilities in downtown Portland, took a look at frankly, the news that they were seeing every day and going like, why are we moving to Portland? Why would we do that? And that project died. And it's shocking. They even have a billboard showing the building that they plan to build. And no one knows except probably me and a handful of other people that, that building is not going to happen at all. And that's kind of unique to COVID, but it actually extends beyond COVID. One of the things that is really lacking in Portland is that we don't have someone in City Hall who is a booster for the city, someone who's out traveling, and that actually comes back to the city manager issue that I talked about earlier. And other cities, you would, partly because you had a city manager who was handling the stuff, the day-to-day operations of the city, commissioners and the mayor in particular would be out meeting with businesses, trying to attract them to Portland, trying to keep them here. That's not something that happens in Portland, frankly, because the mayor, spends all of his time trying to manage the police department. And that's just a unique Portland dysfunction. And other services. So I think we need to change the culture here. I think the city manager would help. And then you need to change the culture here too, as I think too often in Portland, our elected leaders tend to view businesses as the enemy. Certainly I talk to business owners all the time, large and small, who feel that way. That's true if you're a if you're an energy company, or if you're just running a skateboard shop around the corner from my house, you certainly feel like you don't have a partner at City Hall, and we really need to change that. And I will change that. I will always have an open door policy to anyone who has interest in business before the city. Can't promise you that I'll always agree with you, but here's a principle that I will stand by, which is, Portland should be a great place to start and run and grow a business. I'm in this race because historically Portland has been a great place to raise a family, start a business, grow a business, and frankly, it's not now. And that's a tragedy, and it limits our history, and we got to change that. So I'm going to be a partner to figure out how to make business work in Portland. And I also want to remind people that this is a new chapter. This COVID stuff is a big deal. It's going to trigger economic change and shifts. When things get back to normal, it will not be the normal that we had 7 months ago. And frankly, this could be a year-long process. So we're going to have to come together as a community to figure out how this new normal works. And as we transition to, we're also going to need to figure out how to accommodate things like social distancing, how you handle this weird interim moment where we don't have a vaccine for COVID yet, but we still want to get back to business and we want to be safe. That requires tight cooperation between City Hall and the private sector, and I'll be present there for that. And then as we move forward in the future, we're going to have to reinvent our economy. And I'm not afraid of that. I've been around Portland long enough to see us reinvent our economy 3 or 4 times. I remember when Portland was very much a timber town. One of the most common businesses in Portland used to be chainsaw sharpening companies. And today we're different. We're a tech hub. We're an international destination. And I want to stay in that tradition. I also want it to be a great place to run a small business, a large business, and a great place to grow a business. So that's our agenda. And we're going to just have to come together as a community to figure out how to make that happen, because there is no playbook for how to grow an economy in the midst of a pandemic. But if anyone can figure it out, Portland can.
Good. Well, let me ask you a slightly different question. As you
Sure.
know, even though you're focused on your race, there's a race for mayor that's quite heated as well. So my question to you is, recognizing that whoever's elected, you'll have to be working with the mayor, how would you characterize the best attributes of Ted Wheeler and his opponent, Sarah Inarum? Each one, different attributes, but different characteristics, but positive, please.
Sure. Great and clever question. I try to avoid wading into the mayor's race because I got enough problems on my own. But what I do want to say, and this is true especially with you two, Jack, is if you're running for office, you get to actually know the other candidates pretty well. I've gotten to know Ted really well. I've gotten to know Sarah really well. Got an infinite amount of respect for both of them. If you haven't run for office yet, and I think everyone on the Zoom call has run for office, it's awfully tough. And I thank everyone who's had the courage to throw their hat in the ring, including Ted, including Sarah. Strengths of each. They both have a ton of strengths. Let's start with Sarah Inarum. Sarah is energetic. She has a ton of ideas. She's an idea machine. She's inclusive. I trust her heart. And boy, she can work hard. And if the campaign that she's put together is any indicator of what she can do in city council, she can accomplish some great things. Ted Wheeler, he has had maybe one of the toughest jobs in America over the past year or two, and I think that's literally true. I think that he's handled the pressures of the job with honor and dignity, and he's probably doing a little bit better than people realize. Wheeler comes from a financial background, and I'll tell you, the budgets that we have so far have actually, considering the size of the challenge, the mayor has done an amazing job of trimming expenses and coming up with clever ways to keep the city operating. That takes a real skill set. You can tell the guy used to that you can tell he is experienced. And I also think that you learn on the job. Boy, I'm a different candidate today than I was 18 months ago when I got in this race. And I think Ted is still learning too. And I think that no matter who is on council, Portland can be okay. And I'll pledge to do my darndest to work with whoever our next mayor is. I think one of my jobs on council is to make the mayor better at his or her job. And I am also confident that both of these people would make me better at my job of being a representative to the people of Portland.
Very good. Well, that's the questions that I had for right now. Bruce, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I tell you what, I threw out a couple of notes here. I talked about, let's see, we talked about the redistricting piece. I thought that was very interesting. And when you mentioned about adding 2 more people to the council, at one point in time, I'm sure you're familiar with that history. At one point in time, we thought about the idea of consolidating Multnomah County and the city. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I know you've had some thoughts about that. Why don't you share some thoughts with you? I'm not going to give you my input.
Sure. Well, I totally get that. One of the challenges of the Portland area is that, we have so many governments. We have the city and the county, each with their own unique responsibilities. Then you overlay Metro. I think a lot of people don't realize that the schools and the buses are actually another form of government too. We haven't even gotten into the soil and water conservation districts. There are a lot of governments in Portland, and coordination is enormously difficult. We see how the city of Portland struggles with its own efforts to coordinate between different city bureaus. Imagine trying to get Portland, the city of Portland, Metro, and the county together to address homelessness, which is literally one of our tasks right now. So I do think that our web of interlocking governments is a little bit too much. And I would be happy to take a look at transferring responsibilities or consolidating. I think that's something we need to do, especially at a time of budget cuts. We're all, the city and the county, for example, are both going to be cutting their budget by a ton. Maybe we could share, fleets of cars or other basic services that could provide real cost savings.
Okay, we'll take a short break. Welcome back to the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host, and we've got several hosts that were also with us. We got Jack Kerfoot, a few here in the first half, and we've got Jack here, and then we've just been joined, if you will, by Dwight Miller, the pastor, the Reverend, aspect, a community leader in his own right, aspect. He's been here before. And that's we've been interviewing commissioner position number 4, Mingus Maps. I get caught up with that name aspect of it. I'll tell you about that later, man. To the other viewing audience, by the way. But again, welcome, Mingus. We appreciate you coming on. I mean, It's been an excellent show in the first half, and we would hopefully get those folks who missed that first half, get their folks and their friends and whatever. Check it out. As you know, it's going to be on Sunday Live. You can also Google it on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
And also Facebook, okay? And
Great.
we'd encourage you, Mingus, to post that out to all the folks. We can get that
We
done.
absolutely will.
That'll be great. Well, now, for the benefit of the viewing audience, what we're going to do, and I've been down to City Hall many times or whatever, there's a lot of folks that are sitting up there looking at us, all have ideas. Everybody's looking for that needle in the haystack. You never know who's out there. A lot of times you don't get access to those thoughts, okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to use the same format this time around. Format in terms of, if you go down to City Hall, normally you get 3 minutes to speak. Go up to the podium and you share out your ideas. If you go beyond that point, the bells come ringing or whatever, you're off. But on the other hand, if a commissioner or a mayor asks questions of you, then it doesn't count. You can go over the 3-minute mark aspect of it. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna kind of use that format. So then let's just like myself, I've been talking on the front end of it. I've taken up my 3 minutes. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna go to Jack and have Jack. Jack, are you ready to prepare it? And then Mary, then the pastor will get him to ask you a question, and then you can just share a thought in terms of what you feel about it. Okay? All right. Jack, are you ready?
I think so. I'm actually going to use the question you threw out there. I thought that was a great question.
Okay, go on.
All right, Mingus, the question that we'd like to ask you is what bureaus, and these days I think it will require more than one bureau, do you feel most excited, energized, and shall we say qualified to lead?
Sure. I would be proud to serve any bureau, although a couple are close to my heart and I think fit well with my skill set. So, for example, I hope, and I will ask for the Office of Civic Life. It's a bureau I've worked in before as a manager. It is also a famously troubled bureau. Just in the last couple of weeks, the Auditor's Office released a really stunning series of emails and red flags about just literal abuse that's happening in that city bureau. Frankly, it's currently being managed by Commissioner Udaley. It's been troubled for the entire 4 years that she's been in office. I know the folks over there quite well, and they do incredibly important work. That's where our neighborhood association lives. That's where our crime prevention program lives. That's where our graffiti program exists. So these are programs that I think are more important now than they ever have been. Frankly, right now, all 3 of those programs are crippled essentially crippled. I'm not quite sure what is being done there, but we can get these back on track. I'm 100% sure I can take civic life from a bureau that has failed to a bureau that thrives and is really kind of showing us the way. And then I will also, I think, ask for PBOT, partly because I love public transportation. I think it is really a strategic bureau as we think about the future. As we grow, we need to figure out how to move people around, so it helps us manage traffic congestion. Also, I think is a big player in helping us manage climate change. You know, we want to create incentives for people to find alternative ways to get to work and where they need to go other than the single-use personal automobile. So those are some things I'll ask for. Right now, my friend Dan Ryan has been assigned the Housing Bureau. I'd love to have the Housing Bureau myself, but I also respect Dan's vision and leadership there. So we're going to just be talking a lot about that. I love Parks Bureau too, but our new colleague, but I believe that one has already been called by Carmen Rubio, who has experience with the Bureau. And I think I'm excited for her vision and leadership too. So I think that's where we're going to probably land. I suspect I will wind up being your new commissioner for the Office of Civic Life and PBOT, which would make me proud.
Very good. One thing I would like to highlight, I'm not sure if the people realize that when the city auditor raises a red flag, that's very serious. That's like the IRS knocking on your door saying, excuse me, something's not right. And it's important that the city government recognizes the role that the auditor has and shows respect for that position, which unfortunately has been lacking over the last 4 years. But I
couldn't agree with you more, Jack. This is really disturbing, and I don't even say this as a political thing or a campaign thing. When the auditor warns us of, frankly, waste, fraud, and abuse at a city bureau, we got to do something about it. I've been in City Hall for a little bit, and I'm really shocked that we don't have leadership in action on this. And again, this is a product of the commission form of government, where each member of the council gets assigned a bureau, and then they mind their own business. So if there's trouble in someone else's bureau, you pretend like you don't see it. And that's not a good way to run a government. We got to change.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, Pastor, are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, question
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the
no,
commissioner.
pretty much you and Jack hit a point that I was, kind of concerned, wondering what was his ideals or what were the kind of things that he was gonna bring to the city, because I figured that's where he was gonna fit himself to be. And I just was kind of interested. I heard a lot of the ideas, and all of them sound real great. Sounds like some good stuff working together, and it's most definitely asking you about those blinders. That's my question that I wanted to ask you. You walked me right into it, talking about how there is also ability for you guys to see each other's work and help with each other. So again, kind of elaborate just a little bit more on how that might work out, or do you see that being something that could work?
Sure. Well, absolutely. And this kind of gets to, I think, one of the things that's been wrong about Portland government that we can make right. You don't have to pay that much attention to City Hall to tell that members of City Council are not working together now. Indeed, they seem to be at war with each other. That is not a good way to run a government. We got to change that. Earlier in this conversation, I think I said when I'm on City Council, I'll work to make whoever's mayor better, and I expect them to make me better. And I'll bring that principle to the office every day I'm on City Council. And if you think about the issues Portlanders care about, I can't put on my blinders and go, I just care about PBOT and civic life, and I don't care about policing, and I don't care about housing. That's insane. I'm being elected to help lead the city on every issue. I'm being elected to represent every neighborhood. All of this I care about. All of this we need to make progress on. And the way we make progress is to work together and have conversations, and that's the kind of guy I am. And that's the principles I'll bring to the office. And once we do that, that's also a Portland tradition. There was a time not that long ago when members of City Council worked together. And I'm not quite sure how we got away from that, but I know it's time to change, and I'm going to fight to change that.
Well, it sounds great to hear that, man. You sound like the guy. You sound like the man for the job.
Thank you, Pastor. Your support means the world to me.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I'm back here for that other 3 minutes, but I think everybody will jump on this particular piece, and we're going to take advantage of the fact that you're sitting in that bureau for civic life in the neighborhoods. And I'm talking about the protesting piece. That's the biggest thing that's happening on people's mind right now. Folks are worried about their communities, their streets, if you will, and trying to figure out, well, where's their solution? And the leadership is not responding to our leadership. And what my point is that, and I'll just throw out some things from the standpoint, we just recently had 3 peaceful protesting. We had, and they basically used some of the facilities. They used the parks. They had 3 different parks aspect of it, and it was a very peaceful deal. Started out in the morning, that's particular. They were at the park, so Amanda Fritz, that was her bureau, and I'm sure there had to be some sort of licensing. Someone had to be responsible to take on that responsibility. And as I remember getting a license, a permit, if you will, I had to make sure that it was bonded too. You got me?
Yeah.
So consequently, bonded means that citizens doesn't have to pick up the tab if anything goes wrong. Okay? And I thought that process was great. Why is it that we did not use that process in the situation we have here now? And then the other thing about that piece, because it all happened during daylight hours in a respected community, other people came to the park. It didn't disrupt anything. In fact, they participated. People spoke, they had vending machines, all kinds of good stuff going on. That was great. And they broke at a nice, decent hour. And they could have kept the same, i.e. law enforcement team, which was the state, which was the sheriff department and Portland police aspect of it. They had that same group together, if you will. And I thought that was a good idea. And nothing happened. Everything was complete. So I'm going to throw that out to the table. And so that's the discussion. And then we're directing the question to Commissioner Maps, okay? Because he's the neighborhood guy, and that's we're the people. We're the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. You're our employees, so we want to know, well, what are you going to do? What do you think about the idea?
Well, I'll tell you, Bruce, like you, I've been to a lot of protests over the last couple of months. And I think we tend to think of the protests downtown as the only protest in town, but there are protests and demonstrations and events all throughout the city. I think I've literally been to events in northeast, southeast, Southwest. So you got lots of stuff to choose from. And I'll tell you, almost all the protests I've been to have been peaceful and welcoming. And as a Black dad of 2 young kids, I want to thank everyone who comes out to demand racial justice and does so in a peaceful way. That's incredibly important to me. And also as a Portlander and a Black dad, I want to talk to the people who go to protest and commit violence too. And I'm going to ask you to stop doing that. Throwing a rock, setting a building on fire does not set me free, does nothing to make the world more just for my kids. Actually, quite the opposite. Embracing violence actually, I think, fuels racism. It's not a coincidence that Martin Luther King, for example, both was a civil rights advocate and an advocate for nonviolent protest. Because once you engage in violence, I think you just fuel the hate that's out there. And I know Portland is a place that's filled with love and not defined by hate. So that's one of the things that we need to do is I think to have a zero tolerance policy as a community for violence in all of its forms. So I'll push for that. I do, and I want to work with the police around managing protests better. I do think that people have a constitutional right to express their rights to free speech. As a member of city council, I need to defend that. There might be some space within there to kind of think about some constraints. I know Commissioner Hardesty was actually the first one to declare a curfew in Portland in the early days of this. I'm not sure if the curfew is the right way to go, but what I do want to do is find a way to balance, or actually, there's not even a balance. I celebrate your right and support your right to protest and exercise your free speech rights. I do not support the right of anyone to throw a brick, shine a laser into someone's eyes, set a building on fire. That's crazy. That's not the Portland I know, and I think that we should have zero tolerance for that. And I think that we as a community and as a government need to be quite clear on that. So those are some of the things I'll fight for when I'm on city council. And I also think that we need to recognize that, especially as we get past this election, it's time to take the ideas and energy that we see on the streets and direct it into developing policies and programs and budgets that reflect the values that Portlanders have. There's a lot of kind of loud voices in Portland talking about how we need to change. And sometimes it seems like we're a community divided. But, when you actually listen to people, I don't think we're a community divided. I think people are saying the same things. I think people are saying they want a public safety system that they can be proud of, that represents their values, that protects families that look like mine and protect families that look nothing like mine. I don't think that there's actually a debate here. What I do think is there's a lack of leadership in reaching out and taking these ideas and translating them into the ways we actually live our lives. And that's one of the things I'll change when I'm on city council is let's kind of go through and make Portland more just. Let's ban chokeholds and other devices that actually discriminate against people of color. Let's reinvent policing so we can hold cops accountable. At the same time, let's respect the work that our public servants do, whether you're in the Office of Civic Life or you're working for the Portland Police Bureau. I think that we can do all of these. And if anyone kind of tells you these are false choices, I resist that. I think that Portland works best when we work together, and that's what I'm going to challenge us to do.
Those other 2 questions, because for instance, in my neighborhood, I don't want any demonstrations.
All right.
I might consider a park close to me, but I don't want them coming down my street. I've got kids and this, that, and other. And a lot of times I see this vandalism. I look at TV. I don't want them down my street. And the other thing is that someone's got to take on the responsibility of the cleanup and this, that, and other. And that was part of the process, if you will. If someone should be given a permit, if they got the permit, they got to also have the bond, if you will. Because I don't want to be paying for all this stuff. It's nice to say free speech and this, that, and the other, but guess what? That free speech is costing me money. I don't necessarily agree. So what do you think?
I hear you. One of the things I try to do actually on weekend mornings is to get up early and go through a jog through Portland. And I live in inner southeast, so I often will go and run by downtown, the Justice Center and whatnot, just to see the aftermath of what's happened the night before. And it is quite sad, after the sun comes up. What really happens is you have, frankly, people of color who work for the cleaning crews for the city coming through and sweeping up the glass and fixing the broken windows that got broke the night before. To me, there seems like there's something kind of wrong there. And this problem permeates the entire city. I think one of the reasons why our downtown is on life support is there's been so much damage and so many people are afraid to go downtown right now. And I think we just got to change this dynamic. I think the violence and vandalism is a distraction from the real message that I think we all care about, which is to be kind to each other, to remind each other that Black Lives Matter and that we're all Portlanders, and we need to come together and celebrate these facts. And I also appreciate your call and concern for order. And you have every right to be upset about vandalism that comes through your streets in the wake of protests. At the same time, I do think that we do have to kind of let people protest to some degree. I don't know if people should be able to, throw Molotov cocktails at the government building next to you at 2 a.m. But let's try to get people to stop throwing Molotov cocktails. I think that's
all right. As long as they get it, as long as they know, don't come into Broussard neighborhood. As a Marine, I'm a disabled vet. I'm a disabled vet, and there's a 101st. He's going to come up to the table too. That's why we got to ask, and that's why the Reverend Pastor is the same way. He's also a vet, if you will. So we're all vets.
I know. I need to get myself a hat, but I didn't do the service. But thanks, gentlemen, for all your services. This is the best I can do at this moment.
Jack, what about you, Jack? Anything to do on the protesting?
Well, I think the right to protest is something that people should be able to. I mean, that's part of our Constitution: freedom of speech and a right to express their concerns or their position. That's something that we cannot impinge. At the same time, we have to realize that when we're talking about violence and the destruction as we've seen downtown, that's going to cost money to fix up and clean up and repair. And that takes precious dollars. And we have less precious dollars today with COVID than we had before because businesses are closing. So those precious dollars that we did have that could be spent on very important social programs and very important programs to maintain our parks that are crumbling for lack of support, we're taking those precious dollars away. So we have to realize that I appreciate the people that are striking out or angry and I don't understand their anger. I may not agree with their actions, but I understand and respect their position. But at the same time, they have to be respectful of others and recognize that they're going to hurt others, even though they may not be police, they may not be someone associated at all. It could be someone in a neighborhood that could be getting food for the food bank. It's taking dollars away from those type of programs to people that really need the help, especially right now. So from that standpoint, we've got to recognize that actions that we take sometimes have unintended consequences that can be very damaging. Well, my question is, really, what bothers me is when I hear the word defund the police. Yeah. I guess I prefer to use another aspect as well, and that is look for ways to give policing in the city additional resources. It's not defunding the police, it's giving additional resources like the response team that Commissioner Hardesty talked about. That's been used in Salem for over a decade. And I think sometimes my question to you would be, I think we need to be careful with our words, because sometimes the words today can be very hate-filled and very polarizing, and we need to look for ways to tone it down a notch, and also let the commission work together with the mayor behind the doors to get consensus, and look for ways to stop putting our laundry that may be not quite pristine out on the front of everyone else.
And if I can build on Jack's point, I too am troubled by the rhetoric around defunding the police. You know, I'm not someone who wants to abolish the police at all. And frankly, there may be some folks in Portland who want to abolish the police, but I don't think that that's what most Portlanders are saying, even people who use that rhetoric. I think people are saying, let's fundamentally reinvent policing, or at least look at policing with an open mind and a blank sheet of paper as we build police budgets. And I think that's the right thing to do. It's been a long time since Portland has had a conversation with itself about the kind of police department that we want to have. Instead, our budget decisions and budget debates tend to go, do we shrink the police department by 5 million, 10 million, 50 million? Maybe do we raise it by X million? What I think what we should do is come together as a community and talk about, you know, the kind of police and public safety system that we want to have, and then figure out which programs will get us there. Some of those programs may be in the police department. A lot of those programs probably won't be in the police department. But let's start there. Let's question every assumption. Let's start with, let's build a police budget with a blank sheet of paper, but not with the goal of completely eliminating the police. I know we can get this done. There are times in Portland when we were at the forefront of making community policing real, for example. Over the last generation, Portland has made amazing progress in bringing down the number of the amount of gun violence we see in the city. Although I will also point out that in the last 2 months or so, we have given back almost all the progress we made on reducing the number of shootings in Portland. That's horrifying, and I think that we need to actually take a hard look at how we've organized our system and how we're spending our dollars or not spending our dollars, to see if where that's coming from and how we can fix it. I'll tell you, I used to work at 111th and Sandy Boulevard out in the Park Rose neighborhood. And last weekend at my old office, someone was shot in front of my old office at 5 a.m. And then 12 hours later, another person was shot in front of my old office at the exact same location. This is insane. You know, we're on track to basically lose a life in Portland to gun violence every day. I think this is a huge, urgent issue. And when we talk about Black Lives Mattering, this is a great example where, we're losing Black lives to gun violence in Portland every day. This is as bad as it was back in the crack epidemic, and no one seems to register, and City Hall seems to be afraid to take a look at what's actually going on here. I will change that. This is unacceptable.
Good point.
I was going to make sure that I make the statement that seems like we can't walk and chew bubble gum at the same time.
True.
Like come to a point where we got all these intelligent politicians, but nobody can walk and chew bubble gum. Yep. At the same time. So, I heard you state that is my view is that I understand that we're working on the Black Lives Matter, but I was going to ask the question again. Hey, you the guy, because you answered my question before you even, because first thing I'm thinking is that, hey, we most definitely have to look at all angles of what's going on right now. And I appreciate everyone fighting for our rights and fighting for the positioning. But at the same time, I got to fight for that 3-year-old, that 5-year-old, that caught a bullet on some humbug. So it's a big issue. I'm just glad to hear you saying that maybe you're one of the ones who'll be in there that can walk and chew bubble gum.
I will do my best, Pastor.
They act like they can only do one thing at a time.
Okay.
I will do my best.
Jack, what do you got?
One thing, right now, there's so much polarizing. Right now, there's hate on both sides. One thing I think it's important that I think a city commissioner should do once a year is take a ride along with the police and to listen to what they have to say. They're city employees as well. Are they perfect? Of course not. But at least hear their perspective as well, because quite candidly, we're losing a lot of the police over the next few months. And if we want to get the right kind, the new kind of police, then we need to understand from their perspective what is working and where the challenges are. And the ride-alongs I've done, I've always found them straightforward and very honest, brutally honest with the issues and challenges they're faced with and needs to be improved. So my question to you is, I would hope that our challenge to you would be, if elected or when you're elected, that you do once a year a ride-along with one of the precincts with the police.
Jack, I don't make a lot of promises on the campaign trail, but that's a promise I will make for you and with you.
Right.
I like doing ride-alongs. I've done them in the past. They're incredibly informative. I think probably my approach to policing is very much shaped by the fact that I have worked shoulder to shoulder with police in lots of different situations. I know a ton of cops, and most cops go through their entire career without ever firing their gun. But almost every day, a cop goes out there and tries to help someone. I've seen cops, go to Subway, buy sandwiches, and then march that sandwich, into the deepest part of the Columbia Sloughs to deliver it to like a pregnant, drug-addicted teenager who's living in a tent, struggling with mental health issues. Incredibly brave stuff. How many times have I seen cops deliver food boxes to needy families all across the city? I think that we have a very narrow range of the work that police officers do. A lot of them do amazing work. You're absolutely, it's absolutely true that some tragedies happen, and we need to constantly hold ourselves accountable for making policing better and fairer. But I also think that we need to support folks who are helping the community, and the police do an awful lot of good work. And this is advice, the sort of ride-along is good advice, not only for elected officials, but I hope every Portlander, at least at some point in the not too distant future, reaches out to your local precinct and tries to arrange a ride-along. It will literally change the way you see the world.
Indeed. Indeed.
Another question that we just really briefly asked is that, and then it's a criticism of normally the city council and the mayor both. We've not spent, we're talking about reforming the police, but a lot of times one of the problems we have with police is that the city council and the mayor both don't spend enough time educating the public about defining what is law enforcement and what is policing. Now, we're the ones, i.e. the public, we create the so-called concern, and we give it to the council, the elected folks, and then you guys come up with an idea of, okay, this is how we're gonna solve the problem, if in fact it's universal here in the city to make us better, right? Got me? But then once that's put together, you bring the police on and you give them their orders in terms of how do they enforce the law as it relates to the policy that you guys come up with. Now, we don't do enough for that. And so consequently, we got a lot of folks out here on TV land and business, and we can't go before city council, we hear it, and we even talk about the solutions. But the bottom line, a lot of folks who are elected have no background. They have no resume, if you will, to digest that definition. So my question is to you, will this be something that you might be interested in educating your cohorts once you get on the council?
Absolutely. I think that we need to really change the conversation around public safety here in Portland. I don't think our elected leaders are actively trying to make the conversation more constructive or frankly smarter. We need to change that. And I also think that we need to change many things about the way we go about policing. But the way to make that change is to begin with an honest discussion about where we're at and where we want to go. 150 days into protest, the fact that we haven't had that conversation is a sign of the lack of leadership down at City Hall. I'm in this race to change that. I want honest discussion, and I want reform. And if we work together and trust each other, as I know that we do, we can get there.
Sounds good. Right, Pastor, anything else on your end?
Oh, no, I'm glad that I was a part of this.
Okay, all right. Okay, we got, thank you. We got about a minute, Mingus. Why don't you just do a close? Why don't you close, man, Mingus? Put on the close.
I just want to thank everyone who helped make tonight's event possible. I know these things are not easy. This is what democracy looks like in 2020. Thank you for paying attention to this very important race. Let me take this moment to ask for your vote. We need your help to change the city. And visit our website, mingusmaps.com. We could use your help. And if you sign in early, we can get you a lawn sign for free.
Awesome. And what's your phone number, real quick? Got a phone number?
Oh, sure. Here, it's probably best to just send me an email. contact@mingusmaps.com.
All right. Sounds good.
That's the best way to reach me.
Thank you very much, and thanks for being part of the crew. Thank you very, very much.
This was a ton of fun, gentlemen. Have a great weekend.
Awesome.
All right.
Folks,
Thank
And
you.
also, thank you for your service to our nation.
thank you.
I see the hats and want
Right
to
on.
honor that.
Okay, so viewers, tell your friends and whatever, and tell your friends about this interview. And please join us next week when we'll have another important guest. A surprise. It's going to be interesting. Oh,
I'm
yes.
excited.
Very surprised. Okay, good enough. Have a good one. See you next
Thank
time.
you. You too.